Hey everybody, so today's topic is drumstick grips, how to hold the drumsticks. There are three basic types. Sometimes you will hear these types of grips described as matched types of grips, and that is correct to a point, but in any event, the term being matched, meaning the right and the left hand are doing the same thing, whatever that may be, they are matched holding, as opposed to traditional grip, which is where the left hand is holding the drumstick somewhat differently. We're going to talk about both matched and traditional and each different style of the drumsticks, and then talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of all of the different styles that there are. So here we go. The matched grip, both hands. There's actually three primary ways of holding the drumstick. They are known as the German, French, and American version. We're going to start with the German because it is perhaps the easiest to explain and to learn. Flat, everything in the German stick grip stays basically flat. You grab the stick between your thumb and your index finger relatively tightly. You wrap the fingers relatively tightly. You make sure that thumb is pointing out at a 90-degree angle, the thumbnail that is, and the palm and the palm surface are perpendicular to the playing surface. Same thing with the left hand, matched. German, wrist is where you get the power. Wrist is where you get the control. The fingers are the brakes, but they don't really leave the stick that much. A little bit maybe if you're playing loud, but they're pretty much staying on the stick. And as you can see, all the action is in the wrist. All the action is in the wrist. That's called the German grip. The French grip can be thought of as the opposite. So here's our German grip. Rotate everything to the sky so that the thumbnails face the sky. Loosen up the back fingers, slide the stick maybe up a little bit more, whatever feels right to you. And this is all about the index and the thumb. You are balancing the stick on the index and the thumb, just like this. That is where that fulcrum, more than 50% down here, that fulcrum is where the action is, and the back three fingers are where the control and the power comes from. Notice the wrist. The wrist is 90 degrees. The wrist has a lot of power this way, doesn't have nearly as much power this way. So the power of the French grip is diminished. So in other words, the German grip is a lot more powerful than the French grip as a general matter. If you really practice this, you might be able to get a French grip that's as loud, but it wouldn't be as good because you'd end up hurting your thumb. Okay, something like that. I am not primarily a French grip player, to be sure. But timpani mallets is typically where you will want to get into a French grip, particularly if you're playing timpani. In fact, any type of mallet work on a hard surface or a drum head even, you may want to consider the French grip because the mallets have a different fulcrum. Instead of being below 50% of the sticks, it's above. The sticks are made of generally maple or a thin rod. They tend to require a lot more control for that reason. They have bigger heads, different hitting surfaces, and you will find the timpani mallets, suddenly the French grip starts to work for me. Certainly better than with sticks. So it has its uses. It's very powerful in that it gives you control, but it's not powerful in that it lacks power like the German grip does. So what is the American grip? Well, the American grip can be thought of as the in-between point of the two. So you take your German grip or French grip, if you will, and you rotate it 45 degrees so that the thumbnails are basically, instead of German, French, 45. German, French, 45. Just like that. And you use the back fingers to both control and add power to the stick, but they do not stay virtually locked on the stick like they do in the German. They are free to move about so that you can see, you can even control the stick with just your fingers and not a playing surface at all. The advantage of the American is that it gives you much of the finesse and control of the French while retaining a good deal of the amount of power and just backbeat to the stroke that the German does. So it is a in-between stroke. In my opinion, if you're just starting out, it is absolutely the grip you should start with. It gives you the most versatility early on and will continue to give you the most versatility throughout your career. And this is also true if you're a kit player. You will find too that, as I have, you can incorporate some of the other styles into your kit playing down the road once you've learned them and find that your playing improves however you choose to modify it. So start with the American grip if you're just starting out, and that again is a matched grip. Now, the other major type of grips are known as the traditional grips. The right hand's the same, nothing changes there. You've got your French, your American, your German grip, however you want to do it. Tends to be American, held on the right hand for whatever reason, but that's probably because it's associated with marching. Also German as well, associated with marching. And the reason I say that is because the left hand doesn't do the same thing as the right. It's held like this weird thing. The stick goes here in between, that's the balance. And then you wrap your other finger around, and this rests on the index finger joint. I don't know whoever thought of this was really smarter than I am. And it goes in between the index finger middle segment as well. And you wrap your thumb, and most of the control comes from back here, and the power comes from the rotation of the wrist. Notice my arm is not moving up and down at all, yet the stick is moving up and down enormously. Something like that. I'm not a traditional player. I've learned it. I can play it. I play a lot of jazz with it just because it has a different feel to it that I like when I'm playing jazz. I think Jojo Mayer has pointed that out, and I agree with it. You know, just something about traditional when you're playing that style of music for me really works. So you'll see me occasionally do that. But if I need something that's more powerful or more technical or a solo or anything, you won't see me play traditional with it. It's just not how I've done it. So, which one should you start with? In my opinion, the traditional grip is not the place to start. A lot of people are forced onto it early on because there's these sort of myths about, better players can play traditional and marching bands all have to be traditional because that's just what they do, even though the playing surfaces are on harnesses and are flat now. I mean, you have to realize we invented traditional because the drum used to rest on the femur, the left femur, and you physically could not play the surface. If you imagine that your wrist becomes a 90-degree angle here, and you can't do anything with it, so they had to come up with a different way by virtue of where the drum was located, right? It wasn't flat, in other words, in front of them. Nobody does that anymore, other than like maybe Revolutionary War reenactment people, so question whether we even need it anymore or not. I'm not going to say we don't. I do recommend learning it just for that feel thing, but I don't think it's the place to start. I do think there's an inherent disadvantage to it for younger drummers, and it's hard enough to learn how to hold two sticks the same way correctly, trust me. So that's my little speech. As far as what I do, it's kind of interesting. About 1 or 2 years ago, I noticed that I was developing at the time what I thought was a bad habit, and it may still be ultimately, but my right hand, when I was playing American grip, I'm an American grip player predominantly, I noticed that my right hand was rotating when I played kit much more to the French style. And I noticed that, not necessarily, definite French, but way more French than, say, American, right? So sort of the tweener between the two. And I noticed that when I wrote particularly faster songs that required a lot of eighth notes in rock, or even some jazz, it's easier to maintain just by virtue of that back and forth between those. I can almost do it without these fingers. So I started working that into my grip, and I noticed that on longer songs, I had the advantage of rotating. So if this was getting a little bit tired, right, and I'm not paying enough attention to how I'm playing, and I'm getting a little tired in the muscles, and the song's going on, I can't stop, the show must go on, I found that I could rotate to the American and even the German, and that gave me the ability to keep playing longer. That's definitely something you can do. And that I've done, and I actually enjoy doing, and I've also noticed that on my right hand, particularly with rock, I'm much more German with the backbeat than I am American, and certainly not a lot of French going on there. Sometimes there are on single stroke rolls, but definitely if I'm just riding the backbeat on the snare drum, I'm almost all German. The fingers are basically not moving, and that's a really important part of the music. So start with the American, but recognize that there's different, if you're a kit player, there's different grips out there, and that you can work them into your style as you see fit. They can give you advantages, they can help protect your hands and muscles so you don't overexert yourself, and they can give you endurance that you otherwise wouldn't have. So that's basically it. Now there are other ones out there, but other grips out there, but for something called the Mahler technique, for instance, I might do a video on that separately, but I think that is all we really need to talk about today for basically how you hold the drumstick. So there it is. Thank you so much for joining, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, and I will respond if I can. Thank you.